Fear is one of the oldest and most loyal companions of the human species. Long before the birth of philosophy, long before language, we feared. It was not a flaw, it was a survival mechanism. If your great-great-grandmother's ancestors 70,000 years ago didn't fear the shadow in the bushes, they were less likely to pass on their genes. The ancestor who jumped, who ran, who assumed the worst, they survived. But the irony of history is this: the fears that once protected us now imprison us. We no longer run from lions, yet we fear judgment, failure, loneliness. And unlike the lion, these modern fears live not outside us, but within. Consider the story of Diogenes, the ancient Greek philosopher. He lived in a barrel, owned almost nothing, and mocked society's obsession with power and possessions. When Alexander the Great visited him and asked if he could do anything for him, Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." He had no fear of emperors, because he had no need of their approval. Compare that to us today. We carry glowing rectangles in our pockets that broadcast our every word and photo to thousands, and yet a single negative comment can paralyze us with fear. Why? Because over thousands of years, fear migrated from the external world into the architecture of our mind.
Human beings are storytelling animals. What sets us apart from other creatures is not strength or speed, but the ability to imagine what isn't there. We imagined gods, nations, money, marriage, and we imagined threats. Today, most of our fear is manufactured by stories. Not stories we read, but stories we tell ourselves. I'm not good enough. If I try, I'll fail. They'll laugh at me. The Buddha realized this 2,500 years ago. He taught that suffering arises not from pain itself, but from our attachment to thoughts about pain. The spear strikes once, but the mind strikes 1,000 times afterward. The Stoics, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, also grasped this. They taught that events are neutral. It is our judgment that turns them into suffering. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, wrote Seneca. Cognitive psychologists 2 millennia later gave these ideas empirical support. Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis showed how our fears are often rooted in distorted thinking patterns, catastrophizing, generalizing, mind reading. You believe you'll fail a presentation, and suddenly you see your career ending, your reputation destroyed, your future collapsing. All of this happens in your mind, while reality sits quietly in the corner watching. If you speak to a child, you'll notice that their fears are pure and immediate: darkness, monsters, separation from parents. But as we grow, our fears evolve, not because we become more rational, but because we internalize more complex myths. Jean Piaget observed how children develop schemas, mental models of the world, and many of us, even in adulthood, live within schemas shaped by fear. Love requires sacrifice. Risk is dangerous. Success will isolate me. We are, to some extent, all children who learn the wrong lesson. Take the tale of Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. He spoke of the dizziness of freedom, the idea that as we realize we can become anything, we also realize we could fail at everything. It's easier, sometimes, to remain in the safety of our current limitations than to face the vast, terrifying responsibility of possibility. But the paradox is this: to become more than we are, we must walk through fear, not away from it. The most powerful transformation does not happen when fear disappears, but when we stop letting it dictate our actions. In ancient Rome, gladiators entered the arena not because they lacked fear, but because they accepted it.
They were trained to operate with it. In our time, we see the same pattern in very different forms. Consider Nelson Mandela, who said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Or the scientist presenting a controversial theory, the artist revealing a vulnerable creation, the teenager speaking their truth for the first time. In neuroscience, this is known as exposure therapy. Step by step, we face what terrifies us. The brain, which once screamed in alarm, learns that the threat was not real. It rewires itself. This isn't just technique, it is evolution. It is culture. It is freedom. What then do we do with fear? We begin by seeing it for what it is, not a wall, but a mirror, not an enemy, but a messenger. It tells us where we have built cages in the mind. The Israeli mystic and philosopher Martin Buber once said, "All journeys have secret destinations of which the traveller is unaware." Fear is often the gatekeeper of those destinations. So perhaps the next time you feel fear, not panic, not danger, but the soft, persistent hum of fear, you can pause, observe it, question it, ask, what myth have I inherited? What story am I repeating? Because behind every fear there is a possibility, and behind every possibility, a self that is waiting to be lived. History is not shaped by those who felt no fear. It is shaped by those who refused to be governed by it. You are not here to survive your life. You are here to transform through it. And fear, ancient and primal though it may be, is simply the signpost that you are on the path of becoming. If you stand at the edge of fear long enough, you begin to notice something peculiar. It always guards the doorway to transformation. All spiritual and psychological traditions across time and culture agree on one point. To grow, we must pass through discomfort. The Japanese concept of kaizen means continuous improvement, not by leaps, but by micro movements forward. Often, these movements begin right after fear tries to hold you back. Imagine a man named Ashoka, an emperor in ancient India, feared across the subcontinent. After a brutal war that cost hundreds of thousands of lives, he was seized not by triumph, but by fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what he had become. That fear, instead of destroying him, reoriented him. He became a patron of peace, philosophy, and human dignity, one of history's greatest conversions, powered by fear. Fear is not only a mechanism of survival, it is also a compass. When used wisely, it can tell us where our work is, where the meaning is, where the life we haven't yet dared to live is waiting. We all reach these moments. A decision, a conversation, a dream, and a voice in our head says, "Not yet. Maybe later. What if it fails?" But let's ask a more radical question. What if it succeeds? The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne wrote in his essays that my life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. This is true for you, for me, for almost everyone. The mind has a talent for projecting catastrophe, but not for predicting strength. So what would your life look like if fear were no longer the loudest voice? Would you write that book, speak to that person, leave that comfort zone that has now become a prison? There is no guarantee that the outcome will be painless, but growth never is. Pain is not the sign something is wrong. Often, it's the signal that you're finally moving. There's an image I return to often, a seed, underground, in darkness, cracking open. To the seed, this feels like death, but to nature, it is birth. Many of us are like the seed. We resist the cracking, the shattering, thinking it is the end. But in reality, we are only breaking open so that something greater may emerge. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust and a psychologist who founded logotherapy, once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. You may not control the fear's arrival, but you always control your response." It could be a pause, a breath, a small act of courage, a word spoken aloud despite the tremble in your voice.
History does not only happen in wars and empires. It also happens in quiet rooms where people decide to stop running from themselves. There is a revolution waiting inside you, not the kind with flags or drums, but the kind that happens when you reclaim your agency. You might think, "But I'm ordinary. I don't lead armies. I don't write books." But ordinary people move history every day by making choices different from their ancestors, by confronting what they were taught to avoid, by becoming just 1% more honest, more open, more fearless than the day before. That's how cultures shift. That's how families change. That's how legacies are rewritten. So I return to the beginning. Fear has been your companion all your life, but now it does not need to be your master. Let it be your teacher. Let it show you where the lie is. Let it show you where you've been pretending to be small. And when it arises next time, don't run. Sit with it. Breathe into it. Ask it what it's trying to protect, and thank it for its service. But also tell it, you no longer drive the car. This is your life. One life. You don't owe it to safety. You owe it to truth, to aliveness, to the small, glowing ember inside you that says, there is more. Not more to have, but more to be. And that more begins on the other side of fear. So go, not without fear, but with your eyes open, your spine straight, and your soul intact. You were never meant to stay small. You were meant to rise. And now, you know the way.